Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The opening session will begin in about 10 minutes. Again, as you're taking your seats, please take a moment to turn off or silence your electronic devices. Thank you.
Say you wanna get over. What are you gonna do? Watch the world go by in a corner all alone. I know it's none of my business, but there's something I need to say. I see you, you start flying on your own. Step aside and let your light, let your love show. It's a short ride down a long road. When the rains come and the winds blow, let your light shine wherever you go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention, please? The opening address will begin in 5 minutes. Please move to your seats and help us start the conference on time. And as you're moving to your seats, please give us your attention for a couple of administrative announcements. If you have not already done so, make sure to download the event app. A QR code can be found on the screens and on signs outside the entrance to this room and throughout the hall. The app is the best place to get the latest West program information and updates, including details and location of all of the various breakout sessions happening around the building this week. Regarding the breakout sessions, again this year we have exhibits and presentation stages on 2 levels. Halls A through C, where you're seated right now on the ground level, and also in the upper level exhibit hall. And we've added more sessions with timely and important content to enhance the program. Sessions will take place on various stages throughout both levels. Again, make sure you download the app, as it's your best resource for locations and details. We've placed signs and floor decals in the downstairs exhibit hall and lobby to help guide you to the upper level, where you'll find the Operations and Focus stage, as well as the Emerging Tech Hub, the Don CIO Pavilion, and other presentation spaces. For attendees planning to have lunch at the Convention Center this week, today's Fueling the Fleet all-attendee lunch will be served in both exhibit halls, grab-and-go style. This lunch is open to all registered attendees, and seating pods are available through both exhibit areas. Please take advantage of this opportunity to network and connect with your colleagues from military, government, academia, and industry. Thank you to Plexus for sponsoring today's lunch. There are 2 options for lunch tomorrow, both of which require a ticket. The first is a traditional seated lunch served during the Sea Service Chiefs Town Hall session here in this room. The second option is the Anchor and Engage networking lunch, will be served in the upper level exhibit hall. The Sea Services lunch is sold out. A limited number of tickets for the Anchor and Engage lunch are available for purchase at the assisted registration counter in the lobby. There will also be concession stands open in the exhibit hall, and many nearby options outside the Convention Center are available. We hope that your time here this week is more fun and productive than a frog in a glass of milk. If the app doesn't answer all your questions about the event, stop by the operations office located upstairs in room 11, or by the AFC International or U.S. Naval Institute exhibit booths. We are providing an attendee Wi-Fi network for your use. The SSID and the password are on the screens to the side of the stage and are also located in the show guide. Again, at this time, please mute your electronic devices. Thank you, and we will begin shortly.
And roll it, track it forward.
For more than 25 years, Appian has powered government processes, hundreds of agencies across 5 continents. Your mission is our purpose, to transform how agencies work so you can deliver real results and tackle critical challenges, from natural disasters to wildfire response, from supply chains to space exploration, from public transit to chronic disease. Every mission is critical, every challenge unique. Together, we rise to solve them, quickly adapting to meet your mission with AI-powered automation. Modern government systems that drive productivity, security, and progress worldwide. That's Appian.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to San Diego for the 36th Annual West Conference, brought to you by the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International. We have just a few more administrative announcements before we begin this morning's program. AFCEA International and the U.S. Naval Institute are grateful to Appian, Integrate, and Lockheed Martin for their premier sponsorships of WEST. If you have not already done so, make sure to download the event app sponsored by Plexus. The link and QR code can be found in the show guide. The app is the best place to get the latest WEST information and updates. If the app doesn't answer all your questions about the event, be sure to stop by the operations office in room 11. We would like to recognize the many sponsoring companies who help make it possible to bring this important event to San Diego. We would particularly like to acknowledge Appian for sponsoring this morning's keynote. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a round of applause for all of the WEST sponsors. And now, please stand for the playing of the national anthem.
Flag, graphics, and roll track the anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Finally, before we begin, FC International and the U.S. Naval Institute will recognize the winners of this year's Copernicus Award at WEST this week. The Copernicus Award was established in 1997 by the Naval Institute and AFCEA to recognize members of the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard who show sustained superior performance in a C4I IT-related job. The Copernicus winners, along with other awardees, will be recognized individually later this afternoon at a private awards ceremony. But for now, I would like to ask this year's Copernicus winners to please stand up to be recognized. Congratulations, and we look forward to meeting all of you and your guests and COs later this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. You may submit a question for this morning's keynote speaker by scanning the QR code that is shown on the screens at the side of the stage and will be flashed up periodically throughout the presentation. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Rear Admiral Ray Spicer, U.S. Navy retired, CEO and publisher, U.S. Naval Institute.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is great to see this huge crowd, standing room only. I think it's standing room only. If you see a vacant seat, go ahead and take them. But on behalf of AFCEA International, our great partner, and the U.S. Naval Institute, welcome to WEST 2026. Our theme for this conference is Sustaining Maritime Dominance, Warfighting Readiness for the Future Fight. I think it's fair to say that a lot has changed since our last WEST in 2025. There's renewed focus on warfighting. Deterring conflict remains the goal, but being ready to fight and win if necessary is also clearly part of the equation. There's also recognition that over many years we've let some things atrophy. The shipbuilding industry and the defense industrial base being a prime example. The administration is really leaning forward. And by leaning forward, I think it's fair to say it's more than just talk. It's changes to policy. It's removing barriers to acquisition and procurement. It's an openness to rapid implementation of innovative technology. And probably most importantly, it's the funding to back it up. There is no better time and place than right here, right now, at West, to hear from our senior leaders and decision makers and to have the dialogue that we need to have with industry and with our allies and partners so we can continue to move forward at an accelerated pace. So I propose we get to it. Again, on behalf of ASEA International and the Naval Institute, thank you for joining us. We are pleased to recognize Appian as the sponsor of this morning's keynote session. And at this time, I would like to invite Ehsan Wardak, Regional Vice President of U.S. Navy and Marine Corps Accounts, to the stage to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Admiral Spicer, for introducing me. Appian has been a top-line sponsor of this event for the last 3 or 4 years. And I know that the conversation here has evolved from something about having basic conversations about IT to this year's topic being around sustaining maritime dominance. At Appian, we are supporting that mission of readiness across many different angles. We're supporting that with military recruiting to ensure that we have personnel readiness. We're ensuring that through getting supply chain data in the hands of our warfighter and sustaining our logistics readiness. We're also doing that by helping our warfighter procure faster by building out contract writing systems that sustain our, let's say, acquisition readiness. And there are many other examples where we do that around case management through a platform that delivers at speed. So if those sorts of things sound interesting to you, our booth is number 735. We're happy to meet with you and discuss further. And also one of my colleagues will be speaking at 10 past 11 about how we leverage existing IT investments and make them easier to use so we can meet the mission need that we see across our services. So thank you so much, Admiral Spicer, for inviting me up to give a couple minutes of remarks, and thank you for being at this event. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ehsan. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Admiral Daryl Caudle, Chief of Naval Operations. Admiral Caudle is a native of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and a 1985 graduate of North Carolina State University. His flag officer assignments include Commander, U.S. Fleet Forces Command, Commander, Submarine Forces, Commander, Submarine Force, U.S. Atlantic and U.S. Pacific Fleets, and Vice Director for Strategy, Plans, and Policy on the Joint Staff, J5. At sea, Admiral Caudle has served aboard 7 submarines, 3 of which he commanded. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 34th Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Daryl Caudle. Welcome, sir. Yes, sir.
Right, Good morning, everyone, and welcome. You know, I'm going to hope my voice holds out. I've learned that I just got back from Europe, and when you try to do a +6 to a -3 time zone change, sometimes some things give up a little bit. But I'm going to get through this with enthusiasm and the zeal that I normally bring to these events. So we're going to have a good time this morning. Admiral Spicer, thank you, sir, for the warm introduction. And I never know who all is in the room when it's like this, but I know there's many members of Congress. I've been told the former vice chairman, my good friend Chris Grady, General Eric Smith, many senior flag and general officers, active, reserve, retired, veteran service members, leaders from academia and industry partners. It's an absolute honor to be with you today. As the premier naval conference and exposition on the West Coast, this forum exists for one reason, and that's to address a wide array and increasingly complex network of threats our sailors may one day face. Yesterday at the Naval War College, I had the privilege to unveil our Navy's newest strategic guidance, the United States Navy Fighting Instructions. This morning, I'd like to give you a clear understanding of that vision, not as a theory, but as direction that you can go act on. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to acknowledge my predecessors, the ones who bore the weight of my office and the tremendous responsibility to define, develop, and deliver a Navy capable of fighting and winning our nation's wars. Admiral Greener's sailing directions, Admiral Richardson's design for maintaining maritime superiority, and our previous two CNOs, Admiral Gilday and Admiral Franchetti's navigation plans. Each offered the right strategy at the right time and under the right circumstances. But today we find ourselves operating in an era with other great powers, an era in which the speed of decision ruthlessly punishes delay. It's in these complex times that we must evolve the strategy once more, rapidly responding to new leadership direction, increasingly sophisticated threats, and systemic industrial-based challenges. But all is not lost. For the first time in my career, from the Oval Office and Capitol Hill to the halls of the Pentagon and our American people, our nation's leadership is aligned on the enduring importance of delivering a resilient and responsive defense industrial base. The indicators are clear. President Trump and Secretary Phelan's Golden Fleet Initiative signal that a dominant United States Navy is the world's surest guarantee of peace. Secretary Phelan means it when he says, and I fully agree, that there is no future fight the Navy isn't in as an integral part of the main effort. I take that statement seriously and with every ounce of resolve in my being, and I am moving at warp speed to follow up on that guarantee. Because as long as I'm CNO, I will do everything I can necessary to ensure we never enter a fair fight and that our country will never lose, which is why I am with you today. In the simplest form, the U.S. Navy Fighting Instructions provide a conceptual framework for modern warfare, delivering homeland defense, sustaining our global network of deterrence, and preserving our national prosperity. It is my overarching guidance that outlines which investments matter most, the asymmetric capabilities we need to forge, and the requisite levels of technical mastery that will enable our sailors to fight and win across all time horizons. As such, the U.S. Navy Fighting Instructions is our Navy's answer to the daunting question that will define modern warfare for decades to come, and that is, how do we ensure we can fight and win across the spectrum of conflict under conditions we cannot entirely predict, against adversaries who are increasingly capable, innovative, and aggressive at near parity levels, simultaneously in key areas of vital national interest around the world? To get after this problem statement, it was important for me to take a step back and to understand what services and capabilities our Navy uniquely provide and to which stakeholders. As CNO, I have a lot of jobs, as you can imagine, but perhaps at the top of the list is the need to communicate the value proposition of why our Navy matters to the joint force and to the nation. I believe that idea shapes the core of any organization's strategy, which comes down to defining, highlighting, and conveying our differentiated value. So what is our differentiated value? From the perspective of the American people, our Navy assures homeland defense, delivers global stability and deterrence, and safeguards maritime trade, nearly 70% of which moves by sea. That underwrites our prosperity. From the Joint Forces perspective, we provide 7 indispensable, unique missions. We deliver sea control and sea denial, maritime security, tailored deterrence, global replenishment across contested environments, and power projection over the horizon with precision and mass and freedom of maneuver. The bottom line is this: no other Navy, no other joint or combined force in the world can do what we do. Once you understand why our Navy matters, only then can you define what, or as I like to call it, the special sauce our Navy must deliver, which in turn is the answer to our problem. And by the way of the fighting instructions, takes the form of the core implementation concept of full spectrum hedge strategy. As my thinking has evolved over the last several years, it has become pointedly clear to me that our Navy's theoretical approach to combat could no longer be based on capability overmatch, setting a theater with impunity, and winning by mass dominance alone. Under the constraints of an ever-lowering cost of entry and the proliferation of asymmetric capabilities coupled with simultaneous peer conflicts, the nation needs a Navy that can hedge tailored solutions aggressively, innovate continuously, fight distributively, and command with clarity across the battle space. This hedge strategy will be implemented through a set of initiatives, some new and some familiar, that combine to enable a fleet that can learn, adapt, and combat our adversaries. These include tailored forces and tailored offsets, combat surge ready certifications as part of the Global Maritime Response Plan, an enhanced mission command framework, and the recently reduced Navy warfighting concept and the implementation of a new Navy deterrence concept. In its most rudimentary form, the hedge strategy accepts fiscal, industrial, and operational realities. It balances cost-effective, scalable, risk-worthy mass with the most advanced multi-mission platforms we can build and sustain, while taking stock in the likelihood of pacing scenarios and the severity of risk that's attached. When you consider the unique capabilities our Navy already provides, you'll notice hedges are already prevalent in almost everything we do. Our Naval Special Forces and Special Operators, less than 2% of our forces, are our nation's hedge against low-intensity and irregular warfare threats. Our ballistic missile submarines and E-6B Mercuries, less than 6% of the Navy, is our hedge against nuclear conflict and strategic attack. And when crisis erupts or conflict breaks out, the Navy itself is the joint forces' ultimate hedge. Again, able to move fast, stay forward, and deliver sovereign options from the sea. Hedge strategy is a means of thoughtfully bringing the full weight of our maritime forces to bear, providing relevant capabilities for every situation, while ensuring the credibility and efficacy of our differentiated value persist. However, building a fleet to cover every pressing scenario is not only cost and risk prohibitive, but a disservice to the taxpayer and, quite frankly, less effective operationally. What hedge strategy avoids is a brittle, single-purpose force that is either overbuilt for the high-end fight and underused day-to-day, or optimized for low-end crisis and overmatched when it counts. By design, the hedge strategy is intended to be a force multiplier to our general purpose forces, working in concert with the sailors and platforms of our traditionally manned fleet. And I fully acknowledge the need for a bigger fleet. The President and the Secretary of the Navy share the same sentiment, as evidenced by the recent announcement of the Golden Fleet initiatives. But the challenge becomes determining where to snap the chalk line. How much of each force element is truly enough? That is what hedge strategy aims to do. It buys down risk in some areas, shifts risk to others, but in the end, it unabashedly embraces risk to tip the scales in our advantage. To achieve this end, we must buy field posture and ready capabilities, tailored forces and tailored offsets to address specific situations that are too consequential to ignore, but too unlikely to drive our overall fleet design. As a whole, tailored forces and tailored offsets are scalable formations that manage risk, expand mass, force multiply, improve response options, and preserve our combat advantage. Tailored forces are the composite packaging of tailored offsets certified to address specific missions in particular regions. They include general purpose units from the main battle force, like surface combatants, patrol aircraft, and submarines for deployment and command and control. Whether it's conducting anti-submarine warfare in the North Atlantic, clandestine mine warfare across critical choke points, or supporting fires off the coast of foreign shores, tailored forces with tailored certifications will allow our Navy to hedge against the likelihood of any threat without constraining our force design around a single pressing scenario. Tailored offsets are systems and platforms that are most easiest to adapt and combined. They are capabilities like attritable and easily replenishable USVs, MUSVs designed for scouting, screening, and striking, UUVs for water space denial, survey, and mine warfare, and low-cost, high-volume interceptors for counter-drone defense. Together, these tailored capabilities will amplify and complement the main battle force through lethal outputs that are scalable, deployable, adaptable, and perhaps most importantly, cost-effective. It's in this line of effort is where I expect you, our industry partners, traditional and non-traditional vendors alike, to move fast, iterate aggressively, and help us scale these packages at speed. While hedge strategy focuses on a small set of high consequence, low probability scenarios, we must also be able to field a fleet that can be a first responder to emergent crisis wherever they occur. Working together in concert, every tailored capability and every Navy platform will be enabled by and enablers for each other. And that's where the Global Maritime Response Plan shines and our Combat Surge Ready comes into play. On any given day, the Navy balances ships that are either deployed in critical maintenance or progressing through various cycles of our force generation model. The Global Maritime Response Plan is a way to ensure that the ships in the workup and sustainment phases of the force generation can readily flow into conflict if required. And as defined through a series of response conditions, the Global Maritime Response Plan ties force generation to indications and warnings of adversary behavior, ultimately hedging our bets against deterrence shortfalls while denying adversary opportunism. Actively engaged with the GMRP is our structure to provide emergent response options for the President through our Combat Surge Ready forces. CSR is a level of readiness and formal designation for tailored forces in which each respective type commander has certified that a crew and their platform are ready to fight, proving that they can shoot, maneuver, communicate, and defend as the tactical environment and acceptable levels of risk demand. CSR is what actually optimizes the OFRP. Now let me shift to the question that ties all this together. How do we command and control the fight? My priorities of Foundry, Fleet, and Fight are not abstract ideas. They are a warfighting system. And in the next conflict, that system will be tested under pressure, at speed, and under fire. Communications will be disrupted. Space and cyber will be under attack. The enemy will try to fracture our kill chains, slow our decisions, and isolate our forces. In that kind of fight, we can't afford a Navy that waits for permission. The only way to fight effectively is to ensure that every force element at every level can sense, synthesize, decide, and act fast enough with confidence to achieve commander's intent. That's why, to fight at the timing, tempo, and synchronization demanded by the hedge strategy, the Navy will implement the Enhanced Mission Command Framework. Mission Command cannot be something we fall back onto when networks fail. Mission Command must be how we prepare, practice, and fight all the time. So instead of rigid hierarchies and constant reach back, we will build a fleet that operates through empowered, self-organizing teams. Commanders who understand the mission, own the intent, and act with disciplined initiative. Enhanced Mission Command gives us a clear way to delegate decision authority across the force, matching autonomy to capability and authority that demands of the tactical situation. It will ensure we are ready, not for the last war, but for the one that is coming. In order to hedge appropriately, this strategy must indeed be guided by authoritative naval concepts. Last month, I formally signed into action the Navy warfighting concept. The Navy's overarching warfighting approach tied inextricably to the joint warfighting concept. It tells commanders how we intend to fight, where we'll accept risk and where we will not. It conveys a proactive approach that uses the global maritime maneuver space to gain and exploit sea control while imposing sea denial. But if you look at the global disposition of our forces, although warfighting is what we are designed to do, it accounts for only a fraction, perhaps less than 10% of our day-to-day operations. We have the Navy warfighting concept, which defines what and how we fight. But importantly, we need a Navy deterrence concept that defines who and how we deter. Because deterrence activities dominate the preponderance of what our forces do around the world day to day. But the question is, and always has been, what's the ROI of our campaigning efforts? Is it working? How do we know? And what are the metrics for success? As the world's premier maritime force, we must be eyes wide open and acknowledge that deterrence is an infinite game. It's a concept that to work must live continuously in the minds of our adversaries and in turn allow us to shape their behavior to cause a desired effect. The Navy deterrence concept will explicitly define who we're deterring and from what, specifically, we are preventing them from doing. It will help us decide where to posture forces, what they should do to shape behavior, and how we need to tune the intelligence community for the vital feedback necessary to assess our activities. Bottom line, the Navy deterrence concept is my way of formalizing a deterrence kill chain, defining escalation dominance, and codifying it into doctrine. Ladies and gentlemen, on my first day in office, I released 3 priorities: the foundry, the fleet, and the way we fight. They expound upon Secretary Phelan's priorities and emphasize the need to view everything we do through an operational lens. Between the Secretary, the Commandant, and myself, I want to be crystal clear that there is no daylight between our shields. We are working in lockstep to deliver the Navy our nation needs, underpinned by the foundry, the fleet, and the way we fight. The United States Navy fighting instructions will guide us to a more enduring end state, taking us from the as-is, where capability drives strategy, to our final destination, where strategy drives our force design, our tailored force packages, and an investment trajectory to make every dollar count. At the center of this vision will always be the United States Navy sailor. They are our most enduring strategic advantage and the heartbeat of our world-class Navy. Every policy we produce, every change we implement, and every strategy we employ revolves around those priorities. They are the ultimate link within every kill chain, which guides everything we do and serve as the bedrock of my guidance. As I begin to close, let me leave you with this. Admiral Hyman G. Rickover, the father of the nuclear Navy, once said, and I quote, "The great end of life is not knowledge, but action." He believed that our duty was to act as if the fate of the world depended on us, to live for the future, not for our own comfort or success. And with our battle-ready sailors leading the way, there is no challenge too great or goal out of reach that our Navy won't meet. That's exactly what these fighting instructions aim to do. Provide our sailors with a new way to think about our challenges, a new way to leverage the asymmetric advantages, capabilities, and structures to fight and win today, to fight and win today, tomorrow, and certainly into an uncertain future. But the Navy cannot accomplish this alone. From our joint and combined forces across the globe to our industry partners at home, every one of us has a critical part to play. The U.S. Navy fighting instructions aren't just guidance for the fleet. They're a clear and bright demand signal to our industry and allied partners about the capabilities we must build, scale, integrate, and sustain. As Admiral Rickover reminded us, the future belongs to those who act. Our Navy requires it. Our nation demands it. And for the American people, we will follow through with urgency, discipline, and results. Thank you very much.
Admiral, thank you for rolling out your fighting instructions and trying to explain to the crew assembled here what they mean. What we're going to do here is we're going to open it up for audience Q&A. You heard about the QR code, so that's how you would submit your questions. I will magically get them on this iPad up here, and I'll ask the CNO your question.
Okay.
As a reminder to the audience, try to get to the question as quickly as you can so we can get as many through the process as we can. I'll kick off with a question or two, CNO. And I want to thank a colleague of mine for planting one for me. I'm calling an audible, but we've been talking for a long time about a hybrid force, a combination of unmanned, manned,
yeah,
and how we operationalize that. And we've been talking about that for many years. How is the hedge strategy different in concept from what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I love that question because, I don't know, when I came into the job and I was, I'd come from Fleet Forces, every time I heard hybrid force, I don't know, it didn't sit well with me. My little mental balloon, I can't speak for everyone in the room, but I envisioned this pie chart that made our Navy look like we're about, 50% manned systems and 50% unmanned systems. And that's just not a realistic Navy. And so, titling and things actually, I think, matter quite a bit. And so, I try to get away from the idea of this notion that, we're going to get away from, quite frankly, the combat power that our exquisite main purpose forces can only deliver. In mass is a need for mass to culminate a fight. You just can't break away from that. And I just don't see that coming from unmanned alone, but that enabling our great platforms to do that. In fact, I even caution that sometimes I think we can be even learning negatively, from what we're seeing in the Russian-Ukraine war. It's quite different when you're launching something, autonomously, a robotic system, an unmanned system, within a small area, than the daunting task the United States Navy has to do, which is to package those capabilities in a way that actually delivers true combat power. To be able to know what that last tactical mile looks like, to be able to have sailors that are trained to bring that kit to bear, to do that across domain, to answer a key operational problem, and if we don't fight, lay that force down, that new imagined robotic and autonomous system force in the right place, and sustain it going forward. So there's a lot there that we have to work through to how we mainstream that across the .MLPF, from command and control to actually how we employ it forward, that, I just didn't think that hybrid force was getting at. The second thing I would tell you is tailoring a force package to answer a key operational problem is so much more than unmanned, okay? I would argue that, when I say we do this all the time, when the president wanted a strike group level of capability in the Persian Gulf, the tailored force package moved west, okay, and transited the Indian Ocean and arrived at the Arabian Gulf. So this is not new, okay? Right. But what it is a recognition that the Navy has got so many global and simultaneous problems to solve that I can do this without having to think about it in an all or nothing approach. So we have to be in an intellectually honest conversation about what right looks like to solve the problems that combatant commanders have, so that we can make the most out of our Navy all the time. And so, otherwise I just end up with large gaps, and then they get a very substantial tailored package, and then they keep that, then it's gapped. And I just think we can do more than that and always have. Right. And I just think if we earmark and match the threat to what the Navy and how we are designed today, and then when you upgun that with some of this unmanned capability, that we can do so much more than we're currently fighting with today.
Sure, great. All right, I have more questions, but I'm not going to ask any more of my own because I'm getting thousands from the audience. So I'm going to try to work through as many as I can. From Andrew Johnson in Industry, does the U.S. Navy view an enhanced mission command as an evolution, complement, or strategic shift from previous fight from the mock initiatives?
I think it's evolutionary. You know, when you think about mission command, that's old. You know, again, as a submarine officer, mission command is like, you know, my wheelhouse. I get an order, I go on station, I don't hear back from anybody for, 60 days, and we get a list of priorities and we go after it. You know, the fact that we can reach back tends to be we do reach back. So this idea of operating autonomously is certainly not new. We titled it Mission Command, Mission Orders. It's not new to anyone in this room, so it's certainly evolutionary. What is new is a concept that can scale through a tiered approach, the ability to codify that to an unmanned system all the way up to a maneuver arm like a strike group, okay? Right. And have a common structure of a way to talk about delegated autonomy. And so this idea of enhanced mission command is to delegate an autonomy to a certain level. Now, how do you know what the level is that I can delegate that to? If this is a smart weapon that can see, sense, its required tactical environment, then I can delegate deeply to that thing for it to do its mission, okay? So my words are very carefully chosen when I talked about this. Your ability to see, sense, synthesize the battle space I give you is crucial to the amount of delegated autonomy I'll give you. But that's all predicated to the tactical situation you're in, the TAC set, and as a function, and also a function of the acceptable level of risk that I want to take. So when you combine that, you want to delegate autonomy as low as you possibly can. But there are certain fights that everyone in this room should acknowledge has to roll all the way up to a maritime operations center just because of that entering argument to see, sense, and synthesize the battle space is held at that level. Right. So to now get us all on the same page, there's work to do. Within every community, TAC set is defined differently. That's work to do. With everybody in this room, ALR, acceptable level of risk is defined a bit differently. That's work to do. And certainly I want to tier delegated autonomy levels from a smart missile up to a strike group. There's work to do. But that structure is going to give us a lexicon and doctrine to be able to actually describe this for the first time and formalize this in our orders.
Great. Captain Gary Blumberg, U.S. Navy. Admiral, the Navy Reserve Force was not mentioned in your fighting instructions. Can the Navy Reserve Force fulfill a portion of the hedge strategy? Yeah, I did a media breakfast this morning. I find it interesting what people tell me I didn't mention in it. So there's a lot of things not mentioned in it. You'll find all sorts of things not in it. And the reason for that is that was purposeful. I find when I go down the track to try to start have a little bit of a Me Too kind of concept in it, then it draws away a bit from the theoretical approach that document was crafted to go do. So the goal here is to find yourself in it and understand how you plug into the structure that's laid into this. That's why I was very careful not to list things. Like you won't see Golden Fleet Initiative in it because it of course applies to how we're going to build the force design of the future. I think somebody told me at breakfast that my Marine Corps brothers and sisters, I think I say Marine Corps twice or once. So that's just not how the document is structured. Right. So my task to everyone is to find out where you are in the document and to help me work through how I train, certify, and flow the Navy most effectively. And so that's the goal of the document. Got it. So the reserves are definitely part of it?
Reserves are 100% part of that.
Good. Never mind. Don't worry. Jim Raimondo, will the Department of the Navy or Navy write an updated unmanned strategy that lays out or more specifically provides a roadmap for how industry should support tailored and hedge forces?
Yeah, say again the question there.
It's about are you going to publish or update an unmanned strategy?
I'm not ready to do that yet. We're in this discovery, phase of how we actually just now assemble command and control of these forces through the administrative chain of command. so that we can actually field and maintain, sustain, and train sailors to actually bring these kind of capabilities to bear. We're in a nascent journey of how I build ensembles together to solve key operational problems still. You know, we've seen some instantiations of this with Task Force 59, some things Fourth Fleet's doing in, for maritime domain awareness, some things we're now doing with demos and experimentation with both, fleet commanders, Atlantic and Pacific, and what Naval Forces of Europe's doing as well. And so I need to understand more clearly what that structure is going to look like. Again, I've talked to many people, when we bring kit into the Navy, it tends to be domain specific. We'll put UUVs with the undersea, we'll put USVs with the surface forces, and UAVs with our air forces. But then when I go bring that together to solve a problem, I think what we're going to see is that's going to cross domain. So the employment C2 and the kind of organized training and equip C2, I've got to go bifurcate that in a smart way, and I don't know that I'm there yet on how to do that. I mentioned again in the media breakfast this morning that I could easily see a robotic and autonomous system commander, as a first instantiation on the strike group staff. I've got a strike commander, I got an integrated air missile defense, I've got a sea combatant commander, I got an information warfare commander, and then because of these capabilities are certainly going to be cross-domain to advise that strike group commander best, I could see a RAS commander too. So I need to understand this a little bit more on this journey, I think, before I go pen to paper on how it's going to look in the future.
Thank you, sir. From Robert Salvia, Fortress Information Security. With acquisition reform and speed to the fleet a priority and a global supply chain, how is the Navy focusing on securing the supply chain and specifically the cyber supply chain?
Yeah, I can think of no other thing that's probably weighs on my mind more than that. I just had this opportunity in Rhoda to see this incredible demonstration of advanced manufacturing there on specific components, large-scale metal components that, the Arleigh Burkes there in Rhoda need that are, under a compressed and fragile supply chain. As much as I try to stay up on this, I did not know to the extent that that capability exists to that level. So those are the type of things I want to scale to get after the Pareto chart of critical supply parts that, that I'm sitting around, without while I'm waiting on these systems to be brought back into commission. So there's a lot there. I do think that under the acquisition reform work that's going on in the Navy and the establishment of these single accountable officers through the portfolio acquisition executive framework and the alignment of the system command functions into those frameworks is a step in the right direction. So I think that's great. And because we'll now know who to put heat and light on to hold accountable to deliver these things. I think this is part of Navy supply and understanding reliability challenges that exist and a reliability control board, loops that need to turn much faster to get the vital component within the sub-assemblies actually fixed so that parts last the amount of time they're supposed to last. This is about expanding the vendor base. In many places I've got, one or two vendors that are doing things for me, and that's insufficient from a competitive and capacity perspective, so that's there. Then I've got to be able to clutch all that in to fleet introduction and how we actually deliver that to the warfighter and make sure the pace of all these are matched so that the training, the sustainment and mastery and development of sailors is actually coupled to this new improved acquisition strategy. And all that is predicated on everyone in this room that's a defense industrial partner delivering on time to the contracted demands that we need.
Sure. You talked about people, so this next question is a little bit about people. Chief Intelligence Specialist Walker writes, Sir, how do you envision training a tailored fleet while sailors continuously rotate? How do we keep trained sailors in the right place at the right time?
Yeah. The Navy has long solved problems that when I have a problem, I create an individual solution. We're world class at this. You can go in any ship's office and you'll see for every problem, there will be a binder with the name of that problem and a program, okay? If you look at destructive behaviors, we break it down by each destructive behavior, and I've got a program running in every single one of those. I have 84 rates in the Navy, okay? That's a lot of rates. And that's a lot of, just the advancement exam alone, it's a lot to actually pull all that together. I work very closely with, my N1 Caesar and Big Pond Perryman, to work on this problem of how we actually upgun the actual mastery of how we train our sailors. And in my worldview, instead of trying to force sailors to only be able to work on specific kit, which we know they have to do when they get to the ship because that's how work centers are broken out, I want to actually improve their actual theoretical understanding, their ability to generally conduct troubleshooting, their idea of understanding physical concepts at a higher level. And really at these combined technician and hull and mechanical and electrical kind of shot groups of sailors, improve that training at the A and C school level is so long overdue. Okay, if there's sailors in this room right now and this sound system failed, I would guarantee you that independent of the rate, and none of them are first-class sound system men, that they could go troubleshoot this sound system. But for so long, our training system has, just isolated these people into critical NECs and in a structure of ratings that's truly almost unsustainable. So there just needs to be a complete revolution of how we actually think about the basic level of training to just increase the level of knowledge of how we actually do business. When that's the case, then self-sufficiency afloat happens. I know I'm going on this question, but it's so important. We have way too much reach back, okay? And I've said before, if you're a chief petty officer in charge of your equipment and you've got to call for help about a piece of equipment, that ought to be shameful. We ought to really if we have the parts on board and I can't troubleshoot and repair my kit without reach back, then that is a significant issue for me. And I think we just got to generally improve our level of knowledge across the board.
I understand. I know you're a joint player, so we're going to ask an Army question here. Welton Chase Jr., U.S. Army retired. As we transition toward a hybrid fleet, how is the Navy balancing the immediate funding needs of our current carrier strike groups with a long-term requirement for unmanned surface and subsurface vessels?
Well, at the end of the day, that's what, we tend to do in the Pentagon is I try to enable fleet commanders with the resources they need. The people, equipment, ordnance, platforms, whatever those things are. Those things take money. And it's my goal to work with the Secretary of the Navy to optimize those dollars in a way that we can get the most out of them. I think these fighting instructions are the way I'm going after that. Okay? This idea, this optimization where key operational problems are defined and we get our head around what those are going to look like. And then we go make sure our Navy can actually address those in an optimal way. And so at the end of the day, if you do that and you agree that that satisfactorily solves those key operational problems, then that sets kind of the baseline budget, okay? And so budget decisions are always real challenging. And so I break it down to a way with my staff to try to convey my priorities. And I think it's important for the team to hear that. It's really two priorities. There's a core and there's the kill chain. In the core is, of course, the foundry. There is no Navy without the foundry. That is the compilation of piers, hangars, schoolhouses, galleys, whatever, bases, roads, cranes, everything we need to deliver the Navy. We spend over 50% of our time in the foundry, and we use that as the bill payer since I've been in the Navy, okay? It's fragile, and without it, you cannot launch a world-class Navy. It's just a fact. At the heart of that are sailors, and they deserve our utmost attention. We ask them to go into harm's way and to put their lives at stake with the cloth of our nation. The least I can do is make sure they're not living on ships, they're in good barracks, that are not full of mold and mildew, and that we feed them like world-class athletes and we train them to the highest level of mastery, foundry. And that's the total force, including civilians and their families. The second thing is strategic deterrence as part of that core. Implicit in every single O plan, every single thing we do is the idea that we're not under strategic attack. We don't have continuity of government, continuity of decision-making, and continuity of operations if that is not the case. So we can have no chinks in the armor of that. That's why that's such a priority. Our sea-based deterrent is so vital. That's the core. And now the kill chain. So the first dollar spent in that kill chain, and I'll stop after this, is without question our ability to counter targeting. It is the most important dollar spent. It is what enables us to maneuver, to get into position, to conduct our offensive fires. It allows me to sustain. It protects Marine littoral regiments. It's the heart of contested logistics. Everything is in my ability to obfuscate, deceive, and counter my ability to go against their scouting forces to be targeted. And so that to me is the way I spend the dollars. And that just goes all the way down the line to the next dollar is to be able to target. Next dollar is to be able to do point defense. The next dollar is to be able to do logistics. And so I form it that way because that's where we're fragile, okay? And I want to make sure that we're spending dollars in that prioritized way.
All right, sir. Speaking of spending dollars, Mike Nunziato, Defense Industry. The 2026 appropriations bill mandated a plan to brief Congress on the future of FA-XX. Would you talk to the plan for the Navy's 6th-generation fighter?
Sure. You know, first I'd just like to say, it's thrilled to see the national security strategy come out and the emphasis there on the Western Hemisphere and, of course, the Western Pacific, which the Navy has been, I think, heavily invested in for decades. And then the National Defense Strategy comes out. And, again, one of the things you won't see mentioned in the list of things not mentioned is those strategies per se. But all of that was baked in. I consider that my fighting instruction is the implementation framework for the Navy for the National Defense Strategy. It is how we do what is in that strategy most effectively. So I think that's extremely important. And then what was the key there to that question?
About the 6th-generation fighter.
Oh, yeah, FA-XX. And so part of that, and I've gone on record on this, is the need for advanced 6th-gen aircraft. And that's extremely important. But what's equally important, and it's something that Secretary Phelan and I are working with the Deputy Secretary of War on, is to make sure we don't rush to failure on that program. We have some performance problems with manufacturing of existing airframes today. We want to make sure we clearly understand those. We want to make sure that when we do down select and we actually go in, that we're ready to implement that program with a program that can sustain and deliver that on time and on target. By thoughtfully doing that, we believe that we'll actually deliver that better than if we rush to failure, and we don't want to do that. So I look forward to continue working very closely with Secretary Feinberg on this to understand how to ensure that that decision is made thoughtfully and to make sure that when we do the down select process, and nobody wants this more than the Deputy Secretary of War, that it's done in the correct way.
From Tevin Warren, U.S. Navy. As we face retention challenges, how are we demonstrating to sailors considering separation that their continued service is essential to readiness, warfighting effectiveness, and the Navy's long-term success?
I wouldn't characterize the current Navy as having retention challenges, but can I ever retain enough? No. So I want to keep everybody, and so I'm greedy. But we really have record retention across all zones. And I think that's because of just look at our mission. I mean, I took this picture the other day. I was watching TV, and there was a picture of the Persian Gulf, and it showed the Red Sea, showed the Persian Gulf, the Eastern Mediterranean. It was this person describing, what's there around Iran. And I took a picture of my phone. I sent it to my team, and I just said, "This is the differentiated value." What was missing from that picture? The Army, the Air Force, and pretty much everyone else. So, I mean, I'm just saying, we're in high demand here. And so it's extremely flattering to have the problem of being oversubscribed. And so, I look at that as what keeps sailors in. They fall in love with what they do. And that's why I want to press so hard to get ships out of depot maintenance. That's not what people sign up for. And so that's crucial to me. We have enjoyed extraordinary recruiting. We're bringing in 10,000 more sailors the last 2 years than we normally attrite. We normally have a 350,000 sailor Navy. We lose about 10% of that every year, about 35,000. To maintain that, we bring in 35,000, and we just steady state. For the last 2 years, we brought in over 45,000. And when I started as CNO, we had something between 18,000, 19,000 gaps at sea. We've taken about 2,000 to 3,000 person chunk out of that. And I am quite confident by the end of my time, that will be a thing of the past, as well as having no sailors living on ships.
Sure. I think this is our last question.
Okay.
From Abraham. The fighting instructions discuss software-defined warfare and the importance of integrating AI into the fleet, but acknowledges that we have not fully integrated AI into the fleet. The fact that the Navy remains the only service without an AI strategy supports this point in the fighting instructions, and its AI task forces are led by junior officers. As CNO, how will you scale AI capabilities in the fleet?
You have to look at that. I think I do have an AI strategy. I think it's signed, maybe a tad dated, and talking with my AI professionals, I think the core premises of it are still valid. But I am not satisfied with where we are in the AI journey. We're not there yet. You know, I like to think of AI through 3 lenses. One, I need AI to see myself, to see the Navy. I know the chairman wants AI to help him see the Joint Force. And that helps me do trend analysis. You know, this thing I was joking a little bit about destructive behaviors. I'd like to ask AI, you know, give me a sense of where, you know, for this command, what do they need to focus on? What are the high-risk things that their sailors may experience to let leaders know where they need to actually apply their effort? That means I need to have, you know, and I think the Army's got a great program here I want to understand called Army Vantage. But to see the resiliency and readiness and medical and dental in a holistic way, but not just as data, but to be able to do excursions on it and ask it statistical probabilistic questions about my Navy and my force at every echelon. So there's that we need to do better. The general idea that AI enables what I call facial recognition, and that's when you bring AI to see something and then help make a decision. That could be in targeting, that could be looking at the ocean bottom, that could be looking at a license plate in a car at a gate to enable enhanced force protection measures. So it's endless there in what you can do in that regime, which is, you know, very mature, and but I don't think we're bringing it to bear in all the right use cases, okay? And then last but not least is to not have sailors waste time or civilians on things that are just so easily reproducible. You know, the fact that I built a work package one time to replace a mechanical seal on a pump, I should only do that once and never do it again. In fact, I don't even know I need to do it once. Okay, I've only got like 10,000 instantiations of that. Dump all that in, ask the right question, have that done, validate it, issue it, and to go do the work. So this idea of improving workflows, this idea of, you know, I'll call it kind of facial recognition capabilities and how that extends, this idea of trending and seeing herself like, you know, Maven Smart Systems is a classical example of that. You know, so there's the 3 kind of ways I view that, and just we're not there. And so I think it's rightful that the person asking that question is concerned about the Navy, but we're going to get there. I'm behind it, okay? I share the Secretary of War's, you know, impetus on getting this done at speed.
Right. Well, sir, we want to thank you for kicking off West for us. We're glad your voice held up. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I want to thank the audience for great questions. But how about giving the Chief of Naval Operations a nice round of applause? And sir, on behalf of AFC International and the Naval Institute, we present you with the Naval Institute Press Book, Tactics of Naval Combat Arms by Milan Vego, as a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
really
sir.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For everyone, the exhibit floor is open. There's plenty of coffee out there. Have a great week, and thanks again for your great support. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Great job.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving into a coffee break in the exhibit hall, both levels, upstairs and downstairs. And that coffee break is sponsored by Systems Planning and Analysis. This week, AFCEA and the U.S. Naval Institute will recognize the recipients of the 2026 Copernicus Awards, which acknowledge the excellence of U.S. Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard individuals, both active duty and civilian, who have demonstrated sustained superior performance in a C4I or IT-related job. We will also present additional AFCEA and Naval Institute awards, including the Enlisted Superior Performer Awards, which go to sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardmen selected by their commands for performance throughout the year.